Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is another video on Azure security. Thanks to PwnedLabs. They're an amazing training platform focused on cloud security. They've got many labs and challenges that teach you cloud security, and I think at this point they have GCP, AWS, and Azure. I've worked with Azure for the past 3-4 years, and I like to think from a defensive perspective, I know a thing or two. My skills are decent, but when it comes to pen testing Azure, I've got a lot to learn, which is exactly why I'm making these videos. It's me learning Azure security from an offensive perspective by solving these labs and documenting it. So if you find any value in watching these videos, then it's a win-win situation, right? This particular video is about abusing misconfiguration or vulnerability. I don't want to say vulnerability, but it's a service that's been set up by not following security best practices. It's not been hardened, and that's how we abuse it and get initial access. And I think I need to say this, having worked with Azure for the past few years, I have not seen something like this in the real world, and I don't think you see this very often in the real world. But the point that the creators are trying to make here is that Azure offers a lot of services, and if you don't set up something according to security best practices, they can be abused, and attackers can get creative and attack you in ways you didn't even think was possible and somehow gain initial access. So it's always good to follow security best practices. This particular lab focuses on Blob containers, and I think I've said enough. Let's jump into the video. Alright, so I've just started the lab. It's called Azure Blob Container to Initial Access. The lab's turned on, as you can see. Scrolling down, I see the scenario, the lab prerequisites, and the most important part, the real-world context. There have been numerous examples over the years of data breaches resulting from misconfigured public Azure Blob storage, and which is what we're going to abuse. The focus here is red teaming. It's a beginner-friendly lab. We're going to ignore the learning outcomes. And let me copy the scenario to my notes. I always like doing this. I like having the scenario handy. It helps mid-investigation. And let me copy the entry point, which is just a URL here. We've got no other information on the target. Let me copy this URL to a new tab. And having a quick look at the URL suggests that this is something that's being hosted out of a container. This is probably the name of the container, $web. That's how it usually looks like in the URL. And if I hit enter here, this opens up a website. Let me disable dark mode because I want to see the website in its original form, and let me move this tab here to keep it all clean. Right, so this website has a lot of buttons, a lot of pictures, but none of these buttons work. There are no links. It's just a very static web page. There's a lot of pictures and text, that's all. Scrolling down just to make sure I'm not missing anything, I don't see any links or anything interesting. I would normally brute force the directory at this point, but let's look at the source. So if I right click and click on view page source, that opens the source code. Okay, that's a lot of HTML. If I scroll down, yeah, that's a lot of HTML. As you saw, the web page seemed pretty big, a lot of text, a lot of pictures, so I would expect that. But what's interesting for us here is this part here, the actual link to the CSS file. The URL here looks slightly different. If we examine this, we may find something interesting. So let me copy this to the notes and compare it to the starting point. Okay, so the similarity here is the $web, which is the container name, and in the starting point we see index.html, which is the main page of the web page, but here we see static and a CSS file within that. So static is, I didn't intend to do that, so let me remove the link from the starting point. Okay, right, so web is the container name, and static is probably the directory name, and CSS is a file within that directory. but the first half of the URL looks different, right? So why is that? MBT website, probably storage account name. You know what, if I copy this URL, yeah, and if I replace static with index.html, it should take me to the same site. If it does take me to the same site, then it's hosted out of a storage account, and we can confirm MBT website is the name of the storage account. Another way to validate that is by using PowerShell. So if I open a PowerShell window and send a GET request to that URL using the invoke web request commandlet. So if I type in invoke web request -URI and paste in the URL within single quotes and hit enter, this gives us an HTTP response with a 200 status code, which indicates the server has successfully processed our request. And if I scroll down, this header right here, XMS blob type, blob, indicates that this is a blob container. It confirms it. So let's clear this and go back to our notes. Okay, what do we know so far? We know that MBT website is the name of the storage account, and we know Blob Core Windows Net is the Azure service here, and we know that $web is the container name. Right, so and what can we do with this information? Let's pull up the official documentation on REST APIs to list blobs and try to gather more information on these storage accounts. So if I go in here and zoom in, because this text here is tiny, so let me zoom in and copy the very first request to our notes and try to enumerate the storage account further. Let's modify our request to for our use case here. So if I replace my account with MBT website and replace my container with $web, because that's the name of the container, our request should be good to go. So let's copy the URL and open that in a new tab. So let me copy this, go to a new tab and hit enter, and I see a lot of XML output, which is expected, which is what we wanted to see. This shows me that the request worked and we get some information in the expected output. Right, we learn nothing new from this XML output here because it's the same directory names, it's the same file names that we already knew. As you can see, if I scroll down, there's more information on the blob. Nothing interesting in this one URL, in this one request, but what this tells me is that the request works. So if we go back to the documentation and find something interesting, find another way to enumerate and to gain new information on the target, it could be very useful to us. So let's go back to the documentation and try to find something interesting. Try to find an interesting request to submit. So if I go back to the documentation here, the list blobs documentation, and scroll down, I see another different parameter that we can supply, which is include. So if you supply include with any of these values like snapshots or deleted versions, you can get more information on the contents of the storage account, on the contents of the blob container, right? So what's interesting here is version is supposed to give us different versions of the files stored in that blob container, which is something that we can use to find out older versions or deleted versions, deleted files that were once stored in the storage account, if that makes sense. So let me copy versions, detail on the versions to the URL. So if I if I add include equals versions to the URL and hit submit, I see some XML output, but this returns an error message here. So this hasn't worked. Yeah, it says something is wrong here. So let's try to find out why. So this error message here says that this is a one of the query permissions specified in request is invalid. Right, so there's something that's causing this to fail, and what is that? If I go back to the documentation, it specifies that version 2019 12.12 and later specifies that versions blob should be included. So, but the request may be using a different version, and we would have to force it to use this version or later, right? So if I go back to the documentation, I also find where did I see that? Right, yeah, so in the request header, if we set this header XMS version, and if we specify the value that we want to use, so the version that we want to use as the value for this header, it will force it to submit the request in that with that version, right? I know this is a bit confusing, but yeah, just stay with me. So XMS version needs to be 2019 12.12 and above. So let's specify that value here. So that would be 2019-12-12. So this would need to be mentioned in our request header. Let's open terminal and type in curl -h and set the parameter value here. So that's XMS version 2019-12. Let me copy that for my notes and paste it in here, space the URL in single quotes. So if I go back to Firefox to copy the URL, not this one, yep, copy this and paste it in the terminal and hit enter, that should send a request with the header that we just set. We get an error, bad parameter. Okay, let me try that again. Oh, okay, I see what's wrong. Let me try this with Linux. So if I choose Ubuntu and paste in the same command, I knew the command was right, but I should have used invoke web request instead of curl. But anyway, curl sending this request gives us a lot of XML output. This is, you know, as you can see, it's a lot more output than what we see in the background. So let me copy this XML code and paste it in a text editor, because it's easier to read in a text editor. I'm using Sublime here, but you can use any text editor. So if I open Sublime, open a new text file and paste in the XML code, this already looks a lot better than the terminal, but it's still not, you know, not that easy to read. This can you can make this look a lot better. There are tons of online tools. You can use anything. So if I Google Beautify XML and open the first link, you can use any tool. Like I said, paste in the XML, and this already, you know, this looks a lot better. It's a lot easier for us to read and go through. So if I paste this again, replace this in the text editor, and go through all the files, we see index.html. That's something that we're familiar with. We've seen that before. But after that, the next file that I see is scripts transfer.zip. It's a zip file, immediately catches my attention. I would want to you know, examine that further. But let's quickly scroll through all the other files that we find. There's a bunch of CSS files. There's a JavaScript files. There's a CSS directory. And there's a lot more files that you would normally expect to find in a web page folder, right? So there's usually tons of CSS, JavaScript. None of that is as interesting as the zip file that we just found. So let's try to see if we can access this zip file. So the name of the file is scripts transfer.zip, and this is the version ID. We didn't see this file initially earlier, so that to me suggests that this file doesn't exist in the container anymore, but an older version of the file is still being saved. So if I copy that XML code here and highlight all the interesting findings that we have so far, that's the name of the file and this is the version ID. We're going to need these to get the older version. So let's try to craft our request. If I copy the request that we ran and then slightly modify this to include this file, and how we do that is by first, let me remove this link because it's annoying. Right, so we've got the container name, container list include equals versions. I'm going to have to supply a different parameter value here, and that's the scripts transfer zip. So this is the name of the file, and we have to mention the version ID because the file doesn't exist anymore, and the version ID is the unique ID that's assigned to the version, right? So to the version that doesn't exist anymore. So if I copy the version ID, paste that in the URL request, this should be good to go. What this request will do is it'll try to fetch that version of the file that was deleted, and it'll try to download the file. So we need to specify the output and the output file name. So how we do that with curl is by typing hyphen output and the file name. So that would be output scripts transfer.zip. And if I copy that back to Ubuntu and paste in the request. Okay, so that's where are we? We're in the home PC directory. I'm going to create another directory called PwnedLabs and navigate to it. CS. Okay, so that was a typo. It's probably created the directory, so I don't need to run that again. Just need to move into PwnedLabs, which has worked, and let me now run that command. So it should download the scripts transfer.zip to this directory, and it looks like it's worked. I see a zip file here, and I'm going to try to unzip it and go through the directory and see if we find anything interesting. Okay, using unzip doesn't tab doesn't auto complete it, so let me see if it's installed first. I don't see anything for unzip. Do I see anything for gunzip? Yeah, so there's gunzip. Let me try gunzip scripts transfer.zip, and that does not work. So is this even a zip file? Let me check that with scripts transfer.zip. It definitely is a zip file. So why did that not work? Maybe I need to install unzip. So sudo apt-get install unzip. Password for this account. So unzip's installed. Let me try that again. Unzip scripts transfer zip, and that's worked this time. So essentially there are two PowerShell files, Entra users ps1 and stale computer accounts .ps1. Let's check the contents of the PowerShell script. So if I type in cat the name of the file, which is Entra users.ps1, I see that this is a fairly small PowerShell script. Uses installs a few modules, and it's got hard-coded credentials, which is interesting. And then if I also check the output of the other script, which is stale computer accounts, this also has hard-coded credentials. So the first one has Marcus@megabigtech, and this is the password. And is there anything else? Nope. And the second script has what looks like on-prem credentials, and that's megabigtech123, which is the password, and Marcus_ADM, which is the username. So anytime I see credentials like this during a CTF, I take notes of it. So let's create a section, call it credentials, and paste in the credentials that we just acquired. So the first set of credentials from Marcus ADM is pasted in the notes, and the second set can be copied from the terminal and pasted into our notes. So these are all the credentials that we have so far, and we can try logging into Azure with these credentials. So let's go back to the script. The script here uses let me copy the script because we're in Linux now, and try to run it in PowerShell. So copying that back to the text editor, paste the script. I'm going to save this on my local machine. Yeah, choose documents. Let me create a new folder. I'm gonna call it PwnedLabs, and this will be .ps1. okay, right. So the first part of the script installs these modules, AZ and MSAL.ps. I believe I already have the AZ modules installed, which I can confirm. So get module list available AZ, and wildcard should give me a list of all the modules that start with the word AZ, and that looks like I have the AZ modules installed. So let me check if I have MSAL.ps module, and that returns nothing. So probably will have to install that. So install module, name MSAL.ps, and I only want to install this for the current user account. So if I type in scope current user and hit enter, this should install the MSAL.ps module. Let's give that a few seconds to finish installation, and after that's done, we can try running the script. Okay, so we've got AZ module, we already had that installed, and we've now installed the MSAL.ps module. So let's try running the PowerShell script. So I remember placing that in the documents directory under PwnedLabs. So if I can navigate to PwnedLabs and run the script, it's doing something. It's still running. Okay, so no, it's still running. What the script does is, with these hard-coded credentials, it tries to connect to Azure with the credentials. So what we're essentially trying to do is we're trying to log in with the credentials that we just got by running the script. The script's still running, there's no errors, it's just taking long. So I'm gonna wait until the script's done running. And oh wait, it's doing something. If you noticed in the script, we connect to Azure account. So we connect to Azure, but we don't disconnect the account. So I expect us to be logged in even after the script runs. So there's a command that we can run in Azure, right? When you try connecting with AZ CLI or with the AZ PowerShell module, there's a command that you can run which is similar to whoami, the whoami command. So let me copy that, and go back to my notes and paste in this command. Since the script's not logging us out, I expect this command to give me to tell me that I'm logged in as Marcus. Okay, right, so cool. So the script's done running. It's showing us all the display names in that tenant, all the user principal names in that tenant, and it's not kicked us out. So we're still logged in as Marcus, which we can confirm now. If I scroll down and paste in get AZ user signed in. All right, so this is the user that we logged in as, Marcus Hutch. Marcus is the given name, this is the ID, and to make this a CTF, they've also added a flag here. Yeah, so you can paste that in the website. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So what we've done is we got a sensitive file through a blob container that had hard-coded credentials, and then we used that to log in, and that's how we got initial access. So that's the lesson learned here, is to not have a storage account with without access restrictions, and definitely not have versioning enabled. So this could have been prevented if they had disabled anonymous access, and if they had had some sort of access restrictions to the storage account, and if they had versioning disabled. Again, we don't see this often in the real world, but this is one way to exploit storage accounts. So I've copied the flag, which I'm going to paste here. It's probably not going to let me paste it because I've already submitted that flag, but yeah, so if you're following along, you can paste the flag and finish this through. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.